Glad to welcome you to the Organizing Remote Work for Employees program. We are having our first class, traditionally in this format. And today we are going to talk about what remote work is, and we are going to have a remote work checklist, applying which, or checking your company, by which you can see how successful you have already been in moving your company to remote. If in the process, how successful are you in transitioning the company to remote? Let's start with the fact that remote working, for many, has suddenly burst into life. It was related to the coronavirus primarily 2.5 years ago. And to this day, I still follow the news regularly, tracking the news, what they say about remote work. To this day, it is still something of a challenge for many. Somebody out there is fighting to get employees back in the office. Some say, yes, it is impossible to work remotely effectively. There are all sorts of articles and speculations on this and so on. But it should be said that there are also many companies that basically work remotely. Here's a list that is far from complete of what are probably the most popular ones that are just about the most often written about that are actively recruiting. So if you are still somewhere halfway there towards remote work, here's a reason to get inspired and take a look how these companies primarily deal with a challenge like remote. Let's move on. This course has a website. This is what it looks like. And the course has a 10-session program where we go through all the remote topics in super detail. In case you do not know me, my name is Mike Prittila. Companies I have worked for or with for about 16 years, soon to be 17 years in HR. So there's a lot to tell, a lot to share. And here's a list of best practices that I am tracking and recommend you track as well. You know, we have HR MBA programs within the academy. And just yesterday, we had a class about critical thinking. There was just such an interesting theme there that one part of critical thinking is relying on numbers, on facts, on data. These are the best practices right here. It's such a good source of that information. That is, when you need to argue something to someone in the company or make a decision, you can simply refer to these sources, see what studies there are, what facts there are. Like today, for example, I will share one study. It's important. That is the scientific approach in HR. HR, evidence-based HR, as I call it, I recommend practicing. In the analogy of evidence-based medicine, if you know, there's traditional medicine and there's evidence-based medicine. Let's move on. I would appreciate it if you could write about what your position is so that I understand who's listening to us today, whether it's in HR, I don't know, not HR, maybe the chief operating officer. So you share that there was an understanding. In the meantime, I'll talk about homework. This course, like all of our courses, has homework assignments, the completion of which will earn you our diploma. So you can get a nice diploma like this and add it to your LinkedIn. They're going to look really cool. So the confirmation of your buildings will be, and diploma it on a top platform. 1,100 companies are registered there, and that includes even GB Unity, who give out over 1 million diplomas every month. Okay, I see we have fish today. Okay, I see then. Today we're going to talk about remote work in principle. We're going to talk about how this affects HR processes because not all companies still realize that leaving all the same processes, practices, and tools that were in the office sending people to remote won't get the same good work done. Being remote requires a change in the way you approach your work. If you don't do that, there's obviously going to be a big lapse in efficiency. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we begin with that slightly rhetorical question of remote, judgment, or opportunity. By the way, critical thinking, the skill of critical thinking, they recommend challenging, not more accurately, not challenging, but answering rhetorical questions. So the question is, put a plus if you're in favor of remote, a minus if you're against. Let's see if there's anyone here who's against telecommuting or not. Okay, that's it for now. I have a very positive attitude towards remote work, and primarily because I'm a person who loves efficiency. Anything inefficient when I feel it's a waste of time or whatever, it's really stressing me out. And that's what I don't like about office work, the commute to work. What's called commuting? Is it when you have to go, even if you have your own car, unless you live somewhere very close? I think this option, then it will offset the travel issue. Thinking back to his various jobs there, somewhere it really took maybe 20 minutes one way. Somewhere it could take 40 minutes, maybe even up to an hour during rush hours one way. It's certainly not great, really. If you compare these 30 minutes right here, I don't know, to 24 hours, it seems like there's 30 minutes in 24 hours. It's not that much. But if you compare those 30 minutes to the time you have between work and sleep and all the daily necessities, like eating, cleaning, showering, and so on, you usually only have about an hour of free time. If you go to bed at a reasonable time, that is, and that commute to and from work is an extra hour of time you can keep for yourself. And then it's either that or your work hours. So it's actually quite significant. That's one thing. The second is the ability to live and work from any country. Not everyone has this need, There are people who are happy living in their current country and have no plans to move elsewhere. There are others who have the opposite need, to travel. So for them, this is a great opportunity. What is remote work? We need to understand that by remote work, we actually mean very different things. First, it can be a permanent remote position for an employee. It can be temporary remote work for an employee. For example, some companies allow 1 or 2 days a week or a certain number of days per month to work remotely. That's a completely different type of remote work. It can be voluntary remote work, or it can be mandatory remote work. It could be a company that doesn't have an office at all. It could be a company that has an office but also has employees working from other locations. These are different types of remote work, and they function a bit differently. The most classic full-fledged remote work is when a company has no office and everyone works remotely. That's the maximum level of remote work. Next, there are many myths and concerns about remote work. First, the biggest one is that employees without supervision won't work at all. That people get distracted at home, that people don't have a proper workspace or computer at home, that teamwork will suffer, that virtual communication can't replace in-person communication, that confidential work can't be done remotely. In fact, all these issues can be addressed. Of course, if you don't adapt to remote work at all, then most of these problems will likely occur. That's why it's necessary to understand remote work and figure out what needs to be implemented so that these issues don't arise, allowing employees to work remotely effectively. At the same time, office work has its own disadvantages. First of all, people are frequently interrupted in the office. That's a real big problem. When someone's constantly coming by, writing something, and in general, the office is more conducive to interruptions. Furthermore, office conditions are often less than ideal. It's not well ventilated, people are breathing stale air. There can be problems with temperature and humidity, and in general, it reduces brain efficiency, causes fatigue, and so on. Even some health issues can arise. Often there's noise in open plan offices, lots of meetings that people hold. Well, we're in the office, so let's have a meeting. Plus the commute, as I mentioned at the beginning. So in reality, office work has many drawbacks too. Remote work, on the other hand, has certain advantages, things it can offer. First, longer, more productive workdays. Second, meetings are usually shortened, with only the necessary minimum of interruption. You can be alone and think, there's less multitasking, which increases productivity and allows for better adaptation. You can build your own schedule around daycares, schools, children, pets, gym visits, doctor appointments. In general, many things can be effectively combined with remote work. Remote work also has long-term benefits. It's the ability to hire people from all over the world, something that is now beginning to be actively practiced. Better selection, consequently lower cost for these people, savings on office expenses, a substantial amount actually, higher business security, as certain office-related threats disappear. There's no assumption that if an employee comes to work, they're working. This is a kind of autopilot that can switch on for a manager, meaning the manager starts to think about whether the employee is actually working or not, and employees have a higher quality of life and higher productivity. These are the long-term benefits of remote work. But as I said, remote work, when we simply send people to work remotely, doesn't mean all these benefits automatically kick in. It requires adjustment. It needs to be worked on. It's fortunate if people have good experience with remote work, meaning they've worked in a company that knows how to organize it. They come to you with their experience, they've already organized themselves well, and can even give you tips. But there aren't many such people yet, with such extensive good remote work experience. Most are inexperienced, and if the company doesn't help, there will be difficulties. Many things require adjustment. Sleep, nutrition, workspace, technology, work rules, family rules, safety protocols, and all HR processes. This requires customization. We're going to talk about that today. Also, when people leave the office to work remotely, they often complain about many things. They miss a lot, but in reality, most things can be replaced with alternatives. For example, wanting to meet in person. First of all, even when working remotely, there are many places to meet. You can simply meet colleagues somewhere and socialize. Missing office lighting. You can go to a co-working space. Want to wear nice clothes? That might be a need. You can wear nice clothes at home, not just pajamas. Missing driving to work? You can drive to a gym or take kids to school or daycare. Need a comfortable desk or chair? You can buy one for home. People need social interaction. You can socialize virtually, plus meet up in person to make new friends. Basically, you can recreate everything from the office while working remotely. What does the research say? It's very interesting. At the beginning of the class, I said the critical approach to HR is relying on research, articles, trends, and other such things. So let's see what it says about remote work. First, many people, this is from BAF's regular studies, by the way, many people would like to work remotely at least once. It's really a dream for a lot of people. So it's a competitive advantage for companies that offer this option, that you can work remotely for us. Next, almost everyone who has worked remotely is willing to recommend it to others, meaning they enjoyed it. That's great too. For example, from a referral program perspective, remote work will also help generate additional candidates. Next, what's the biggest benefit of remote work? The ability to work flexible hours and from anywhere, plus no commute? Those are the three big advantages. That's really amazing. It's life-changing, taking life to another level. Observing my network, I see what's happening with them, how they work. These people, realizing they can work remotely, start choosing different places to live. Someone moved to Bali. It's very cheap there. Some just rented a house in the countryside, since they don't need to commute. They can work from home or outdoors. So they rent houses and end up working in nature, really enjoying themselves. All advantages. Next, the biggest challenge in remote work is interaction and communication. And that's where companies need to get seriously involved. We'll have many classes in our course about how to organize this. The feeling of loneliness is also real. If nothing is done about it, it can get very boring. Inability to disconnect. Because when you go to the office, you're at work, then you come home and disconnect. But at home, you seem to be at work all the time. And there can be distractions at home too. Those are drawbacks. Well, all of this can be solved, so our checklist even includes these items and recommendations. And you know what I want to say here? From a remote work perspective, a company needs to go beyond just providing tools to people, establish some processes. The company needs to take on roles. I really want everyone to realize this. And remember, the company should take on the role of a life hacker coach who helps employees work effectively remotely. To the point that it's on our checklist, we'll even cover it today. To the extent that the company should advise people on how to best organize their leisure time when working remotely. This isn't about imposing, but about active participation. The company needs to look a bit beyond traditional relationships. It should show care for employees. This has been a trend for a while, and companies have long been trying to solve various problems and challenges. The same employee assistance programs and EAPs. They're like an image of this action, an attempt to solve people's problems and challenges, or even introducing internal coaching, NAM partners. That falls into this category too. But the company needs to go even further. Ideally, through these same partners, analyze how each employee works and lives, and provide guidance, discuss these issues. For example, let's say we have an employee named Vladislav. I'm a partner, for instance, and Vladislav is an employee. What should I say? Vladislav or Vlad? How's your remote work going? Good. Tell me how you've set up your home workspace. Where do you work? Well, in the kitchen. Oh, in the kitchen. I guess that's convenient. You can open the fridge and grab a snack, but doesn't the constant food distract you? Surely people come in to eat. Have you thought about setting up a workspace somewhere else in your home? Maybe in the bedroom. Maybe on the balcony, that's really trendy now. Or maybe set aside another space. He thought, well, I can't plan it out. Listen, I know a good designer. Let's have them look at your layout and suggest where you could set up a good workspace. Okay, that's the kind of conversation this fictional partner should have with a company employee. Offering suggestions, help, not waiting for the employee to figure it out alone. We need to help. Next, what percentage of time do people work remotely? Among those who participated or are interested. The majority work 100% remotely, and some work less. Which of the following best describes people? Like how much they work remotely? Most people do. Some would like more, and only 11% would like less. Those who are apparently new to this topic. How much vacation time the company offers, which is also interesting. Most in the format of this one are remote unlimited. So for remote employees, companies stop keeping track of how long you're on vacation. You have a goal, you have tasks, you have a system where you work. Yes, you determine how you vacation, but don't fail your goals. Next, how much vacation time you took last year. Here's wondering too, people don't abuse for 2 weeks. I'm in favor of people taking 4 weeks off though, because 2 weeks is not enough. A year's rest. Where do people work from? Most work from home. Somebody works in a company office. I mean, if a company, has like offices scattered around the world, like co-working spaces, just not an outside aching company, flexible workplaces. He came, he worked, he left, and that's where they come in combinations. Next, what's your company's attitude towards remote work? Part of the company works all the time remotely and part in the office. Most companies, and I think it will continue, then most likely I'm describing now, then it's a normal story. But there are times like 30% when everyone works remotely. It happens too. What's the second place where people still work from? Coffee shops and cafes. People for a change go to some coffee shop where other people are to be around other people and switch. Often those who work remotely, they have the other half also work remotely. People want to be by themselves, so they go to some coffee houses and work there drinking coffee. Plus the visual change of scenery is nice too. How often do you travel, work outside of your hometown? Sometimes most, 1 week, a month, not often, and div% often. That is those who are traveling. So 3%. I mean, there are people who have a direct need to travel. They call themselves digital nomads. Digital. I have a few of these acquaintances. They're really getting high off of it. A guy I know, he's clearly a digital nomad. I've been watching him for probably the last 2 years, so actively, and he's constantly on the move. Even when he was in Ukraine, he's in different cities. He's from the same city himself, not Kiev. I spent some time in Kiev, traveled around Ukraine, went to Europe, traveled to different cities, then went to warmer countries. There's changing locations. I mean, he likes it, constantly changing, and he enjoys it. Have you always supported remote work? Most of them, yes. People are very tuned into it. What percentage of the company works remotely? Most 3% from 1 to 25%. At the same time, there are companies that constantly. The question of what sources the stats are from is the source of the Buffer survey. They hold it every year. It's such a well-known company. They write a lot of articles. It's a full-fledged company, and they share a lot of their experiences in the community. They're such fans of remote work. Buffer company. There's a link to that study in that presentation. I'll give a presentation later and post it in the chat room. You can watch it. How many employees does the company have? Most people who work remotely are between 11 and 50 people. I will say that, in general, seeing this one here, the distribution by company size is somewhere in line with the normal distribution of employees by company size. That is, in general, and people, most of those who are not related to remote work such companies. So we can say that remote work affects everyone evenly. Does the company pay for home internet service? No, I wonder. Does the company pay for the work in forging? No. Does the company pay for cell phone service? No, there are some where they pay, but most don't. How much do you yourself spend on co-working monthly from $1 to $100? It shows that people visit most. There's a once a month co-working space. Does the company cover the cost of food and coffee at the coffee shop? No. Here you go. How much money per week do you spend at the coffee shop between $1 and $5? These are some interesting statistics. That is, the world lives in it, the world lives by it. People want it, the company is so willing to practice it. I think that since there is such an observed mutual agreement, the remote will be for the long haul. Companies will continue to look for better ways to deal with employees. Recently, Google, they have always been adept at being efficient. I mean, they are always optimizing, improving everything, and they have a lot of remote employees. They recently wrote that we need to work harder. There's a lack of diligence. And they're trying to improve performance, and rightly so. The thing is, I'm going to repeat this idea of mine. If you just send employees to remote work or organize the company with certain work, believing that it will form itself, that people will work effectively, no. It is possible to work remotely effectively if you do it. I mean, this kind of, let's separate it out. I'll call it remote management. It has to be separate. That is, there should be classic people management, which is standard work with people. There should be classic functional management, fulfilling the functions of each department in the company. And there should be remote management. Focused, purposeful work to organize remote work. Many ignore this, implementing only basic things, but it needs to be addressed. It really needs to be managed. You can't let this go unattended. Well, you can, but then you'll lose 30, 40, 50% efficiency. Why would you want that? If you can simply organize the work properly and get high-performing people. Because the companies I listed at the beginning of this presentation certainly don't let things slide. Almost every one of these companies has a remote book published on their website where they share a set of practices. If you look, there are many of them. When I was preparing this course, I gathered a lot of information on different companies' experiences to not miss anything important, interesting cases, and so on. It's not at all simple for them. It's not just like, oh, we work remotely. We have a chatbot there that connects 2 people weekly. No, it's a whole set of practices, 10, 15, 20 of them. So you can ask yourself a question. How many different practices do we have in our company that we didn't have when people worked in the office, or that traditional companies don't have? If you counted less than 10, you definitely haven't prepared for remote work, and you can certainly improve a lot. Next, office and remote work have their differences, and here's a simple example. Practice adaptations. For example, in an office, the boss sees employees at any time. In remote work, employee performance is monitored by results. Definitely not by screenshots of their screens. In the office, you can walk up and talk to an employee. In remote work, you can always message someone in chat and not lose your request, which has its advantages. In the office, everyone can gather together. Remote work is like that too. It's possible if people are in the same city. If not, there are other ways. In the office, there's an opportunity to control how much someone works. Remotely, this isn't necessary. It's not necessary, the result is what's important. Well, there are many advantages or features of office work just like remote work, but I'll say it again, it's not going to happen. These benefits won't work by default, just on their own. Here, for example, is team building. Team building can also be organized with remote employees by arranging various activities. For example, a chat room called a virtual water cooler. Because by analogy, in an office, everyone comes to get water. In chat, it's communication. Communicate via video calls. Organize offline volunteer activities. Organize employee training. Budget for in-person meetings. Give people photos of each other so they can make nice posters to see their colleagues, print them out. You can do all sorts of online team building in the form of games or interactions. Lots of ideas in general. It's definitely worth trying video games. Surely there must be gamers in the company, people who are already into specific games. They just need to be identified and asked what games they'd like to play with other colleagues. I mean, there's probably someone in the company who plays, someone who doesn't, but someone who doesn't might be very willing to try. You don't have to. You can try to offer everyone something new, but it's good to build on what your people already play. Because if you engage passionate employees who are fans of certain games, they'll be able to engage others more actively. Next, the impact on the process is that it will be different. So we have here in this presentation, there will be a checklist that I've specially prepared. It's actually quite large. It consists of a separate check. This is what it looks like. You'll be able to copy it for yourself. It consists of a separate checklist for preparing for remote work called Section 0. Here's what's purely about remote work. There are many items in this 0 section, 63 lines. That's about 150 items. This is what basically needs to be done. Then there's the usual HR audit of work in the company, but there's a column called, I'll show you, for the remote team. That is, separately for the remote team, all processes are adapted. Some company processes may not exist, and some may exist, but they need to be transformed for remote work. There are very few processes that don't require any changes at all. I highlighted them separately. Look how few there are. Everything else can be adapted or changed for remote work. There are some things that don't change. There are some things that do change. I recommend you fill out this checklist to see how things are going for you. And now let's go through the main sections of this checklist. That is, what areas your company should be thinking about. I'll even say it's not just that, but especially if you have people working remotely already for a year, or for some, and for others 3 years, that is, those of you who were in March 2020. In March 2020, you sent people to remote work when the quarantine had just begun. That means it's been 2.5 years already. You've gained some experience, developed some practices, built something. It's very useful to check now, after these 2.5 years. Have you done everything possible to make remote employees work as efficient as possible? Or did you forget something or miss some important practice? That's why I recommend this checklist to everyone. Now let's talk about what to do when transitioning to remote work or just doing another audit. First of all, you should always analyze the current situation. Because if you've been preparing people, the company, and everything for remote work for 2.5 years, the situation will be different now. Now, 2.5 years later, we live in a different world, and it will keep changing. I think it will be quite different in 6 months too. So it's always useful when you do an audit and fill out an audit checklist to do a summary and pestle analysis, as well as strategy development, SWOT analysis. What is it? It's an analysis of the company's internal strengths and weaknesses. From a remote work perspective, we analyze specifically what your existing strengths are for remote work. As a remote working company, what are some weaknesses? We also analyze external factors, opportunities, and threats. To better analyze external factors, we should do a pestle analysis. Pestle analysis examines 6 key areas that affect any company. This includes politics, economics, society, technology, environment, and legislation. And you need to look at what's happening specifically in these 6 areas right now where you live and how to account for it, how it affects your company. So this needs to be analyzed as things are constantly changing. We're in a world where changes regularly attack us and will continue to do so. Next, time zones. That's also an interesting point worth thinking about. Because even if you were all in one city in one country, your people may have already dispersed, maybe starting to disperse, or will disperse. Because when people see that they can work remotely, they start considering other countries. Socialization is also very important to think about how you are going to handle it. And synchronous communication. This is an important point. The thing is, when starting remote work, companies initially try to maintain all the same processes as in the office, but in fact, this is wrong. Companies that have been remote for a long time, meaning companies that have been working remotely for 5 or even 10 years, they have already trained and learned a lot. So let us look at where those companies have gotten to, where companies start from when they begin remote work, and where you actually are in terms of the evolution of remote work. So, level 1 of remote work is the level with no preparation. This is when a company does absolutely nothing for remote work. That is, the company has the usual technologies, email, the ability to connect from a laptop from somewhere, but has not thought about remote work at all, and on the contrary, even expects it to end very soon. Many companies were at this level before the coronavirus started. That is why, if you remember, when the first serious quarantine started, many companies said, okay, let us wait a week and return to the office, or 2 weeks, and a month. Many sent employees on vacation, either paid or unpaid. They thought, we will just wait it out and then continue working. This is, of course, wrong, because many companies never managed to recover after sending people to remote work. The second level of remote work is when the company finally realizes, okay, yes, we are working remotely. Let us do everything like we did in the office. I observed this. I found it very interesting to watch. It was probably April 2020 when many started posting. Again, I have a large network. I see these photos. People write, today we dressed as if we are at work. We have been in touch all day today. Our team connected in the morning and we were connected and working online all day. They tried to act as if they were sitting in the office. The team connected and worked all day. Imagine being online all day. They wrote things like, we've set a schedule. Every employee must be online from 10 to 17. No breaks longer than half an hour. This probably didn't happen in all companies, fortunately. But many wrote something like, we sent something to people from work. This is basically what I'd call pseudo-remote work. The third level is the adaptation level. When a company understands that remote work needs different conditions, different communication, different tools, fewer calls, and they start to slowly focus on asynchronous communication. Asynchronous communication is not real-time communication. It's when I write something somewhere and go about my business. The person reads it when it's convenient for them and responds. And the fourth level is when communication is fully asynchronous, when people do a piece of work and think about how they'll pass it on so another employee can finish it later. Some companies even practice this, especially, for example, in tech companies. To have software development going on 24 hours a day, they hire teams in different parts of the world, and the teams hand off work to each other. So when a developer in one country gets tired and goes home, their work is picked up by a developer whose workday is just starting, and they continue the work. When they get tired, another developer picks up where they left off. There's even a term for this which actually comes from support, follow the sun. It means following the sun. The sun moves and the work moves with it. It's like the world, well, not the world. People will say I'm crazy, the sun doesn't revolve around the earth revolves around the sun. That's how it looks actually. It's the earth that rotates. The idea is that companies are starting to use this ability to work continuously. Furthermore, for remote work, a new set of skills is very important for employees to develop, assess, and be aware of. These skills are called remote and digital skills. Due to their technical interests, many people have already developed these skills, even when working in an office. Some people haven't developed them at all. There are people, who are very analog. They struggle with this, and they suffer the most from remote work. There's an opinion. Is remote work suitable for everyone? No, it's not suitable for people who have absolutely no remote and digital skills, and who also have no talent for it. Remote work will be more difficult for them. But fortunately, such people are not the majority. That's one thing. And secondly, these skills can be developed, fortunately. Let's move on. Tools. Additional tools are needed for remote work. We'll have a separate overview session on tools, but these are definitely tools that are often not used in a typical company, although of course there are many companies that use everything possible even in the office. But that's overkill. They're very fanatical about such things here. Let's move on. There are some very interesting solutions for remote work. For example, there's software for sound absorption. I've been using it for 2 years now. It's called CRS because in remote work, sometimes what happens is someone's doing renovations. Imagine I'm hosting a webinar. Right now, there's nothing like that, but neighbors might turn on a power drill at that time. And I've had that happen once. I'm hosting a webinar, a power drill starts, and students write, Mike, how can you work in these conditions? We can tolerate it, but we understand how difficult it is. Then I installed Crisp and you won't hear any sounds at all. I can demonstrate. Watch, I'll clap my hands. I can't hear it myself, of course, but I think you can't hear me clapping my hands. If I turn it off now, I've turned this program off, I'm going to clap my hands, you'll probably hear it. Put a plus sign if you can hear it now. Again, I'm turning on sound cancellation, or rather absorption. I'll talk and clap again. And again, I think I can clap really hard with amplified sound, but you can't hear it. Moreover, this program works both ways. If I'm on a video call, I can turn on sound filtering for the other person. They might not have the program, but if they have a drill running, I can mute it for myself. I'll only hear their voice. Next, a few interesting tips. For remote work, it's recommended to slightly change the hiring scheme, to hire people with the understanding that they'll be working remotely. For example, hire more people who are called doers. For instance, companies like Google constantly hire these people. They even have special tests. But in general, it's important to think about this too, to hire people who don't need strict control. Now, how to prepare a company for remote work in the future or present? Several directions. In this course, we'll have sessions where we'll go through them in super detail. I'm just giving a general overview for now. So, the first thing is work rules. You need to think about how you expect employees to work. I'll remind you that many things here are communicated to employees not so much as requirements, but as a set of recommendations that are very useful to follow. For example, time zones. When you expect a person should respond to emails, should they be immediately available for calls? Or is it possible to have calls scheduled at least a day in advance? Next, sleep and nutrition. This is definitely something you can't control, but it's worth considering and recommending. Mental health. It definitely needs attention because people who are unaccustomed to remote work may experience difficulties, especially at first with loneliness, communication, and so on. So these issues definitely require regulation. Next, workplace. Again, you probably won't demand that an employee must have a separate room, desk, and chair, but having a well-organized workspace definitely has an impact, so you need to get involved in this. For example, good pictures of what people's workplaces look like. This needs to be monitored, help people feel comfortable, because when your workplace feels good, you feel good working there too. By the way, I've been working remotely for several years, and my workspace has transformed several times and continues to evolve. I'm constantly thinking about how I can improve it further, make it even more enjoyable and comfortable, so that I can be at my best. I can see the results. When I change something, I notice that I work better. Another important factor is lighting. For instance, there are several lamps set up so that you can see me properly. If I turn them off, my image would be dark. These are examples of how companies are adapting. Those very posters that help people feel like part of the company while working remotely. I'd also add photos of people to these posters. That would be cool too. Family rules. That's another good topic. Helping family members organize their interactions. Communication. I'd probably call this one of the most crucial areas that needs attention. It really needs to be managed. Even for a large company, I'd probably consider recommending hiring a communications manager, not just for HR communications, but for overall company communications who would develop this system, conduct training, onboard new employees, and so on, to ensure these communications are effective. Work monitoring, was also the first thing that came to many companies' minds. Let's install some software. It will monitor people. That's very bad. And let's do time tracking. People will log how much time they spent on what. Also very bad, and it significantly reduces productivity. But on the other hand, there are perfectly normal tools that will actually increase productivity. Like regular one-on-one meetings with a supervisor weekly online, those will help. Socialization is another area worth working on. It's close to communications, but also to mental health, though it's slightly separate. Technology. And I recommend this because companies save a lot of money on office space. For example, on average, 5 square meters are allocated per employee. That's without technical rooms. If you take all the rooms in the company and divide by the number of people, it's about 10 square meters per person. A square meter in a good business center costs from $15 a month. That's $50 without utilities like water, heating, and so on. Cleaning. $150 per person is a very good budget to spend on various technologies. I once calculated in one of the companies where we had a lot of technology, we were spending up to $50 on all licenses, on all Slack boards, task management systems, and so on. So it was up to about $50. And basically, I would say that for remote employees, it's not a great goal, of course, but set yourself a goal to think about whether you're being too frugal. Bring your technology spending per person up to at least $50. Give people everything they need to do their jobs. This is in addition to what was in the office. So this doesn't include licenses for the operating system, Office suite, email, that's on top. Because you're saving that money on office space. Culture also requires adaptation. It's different after all. Motivation really needs a lot of work here. Remote workers can be very motivated if you organize them properly. If you don't, motivation will definitely drop. And Apple and Google and many companies have faced this. So you definitely need to take this into account. We also need to adapt and change. Obviously, you won't change all employees at once, and gradually you'll get new people, but you need to start hiring people who will be most effective in remote work. Security also requires adaptation. That's something to think about too. Both information and physical security. If you think it doesn't need adapting, just subscribe. I'm subscribed to several channels that post all kinds of leaked databases. Every day, hackers breach some company and post employee and customer data online. Every day, and I think in the channel I read, Not everything gets published by far. Team building is also a very important part. It's worth taking control of. Plus, these skills I was talking about, they need to be developed. I'll share the link to the data leak channel I read. There are actually a lot of them. I read this channel. I read it to remember that everything on the internet is easy to hack. I mean, I read about which companies get hacked. I don't use it for anything else, and I give examples to students saying it might seem like everything is nice and rosy, but no. Subscribe to the channel, see how much is going on. It's a sensible channel. It doesn't publish all these links to databases and so on. It just reports what kind of information has leaked. So it's an ethical channel, I'd say. Where to look for employees? There are specialized job boards. Now, of course, standard job boards have also adapted, starting to add some checkbox options, although very slowly. If you look at the major portals, I'll say that I'm very dissatisfied. With all their work, the big sites are years behind in progress and aren't doing anything. I've made some attempts to communicate with them, but they have no interest. They seem to think only in terms of traffic and their own revenue. They've forgotten about the user, and they have large marketing departments, content marketing teams, and so on. Money is being spent, but it's all for nothing. I don't know what to do about it. I'm glad that new sites are appearing, still small, that are trying to change things and communicate differently. So look beyond traditional websites and look at international ones as well. Now for the homework. For those on the course, you'll need to fill out a remote work audit checklist and write a list of 5 things you need to implement now. This concludes our first topic. Next, we'll go deeper into everything we've overviewed today. We'll examine tools and approaches in more depth, how to actually apply all this in a company. Again, although remote work started 2.5 years ago for many companies, it's not yet time to relax. Here's what Gallup's research says, for example. Since the start of remote work in 2020, employee engagement worldwide has started to decline. It was rising by 1 to 2% annually until 2020, then it started falling. So companies haven't yet mastered the challenge of making remote workers effective. Therefore, it's no excuse. I understand that remote work may not be as hyped now as it was 2.5 years ago, but that's no reason to relax and do nothing about it. Here's what needs to be done. Books and materials, all sorts of instructions from the same companies I mentioned. Buffer published their remote workbook, plus the book as a whole is helpful too. Here's another list of companies to analyze for remote work. For those interested in looking, who else? At the beginning of the class, I gave about 15 companies, but this is a big list. You can track who's offering remote work. There you go. That's all for today. Once again, I invite everyone to these courses. If you have any questions, you can ask. Now, while you're writing your questions, I'm going to drop the presentation into Mike Academy's Telegram chat, and we'll post the recording tomorrow. I'll post that. It will be up tomorrow. I see your thanks. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for your interest. The link to the checklist is in the presentation I posted in the Telegram channel. It says checklist. Here's the slide. It's slide 47. On the 47th slide, there's a clickable link. Here it is. You'll find it and can open it. Yes, please. Have you had personal experience supervising remote employees? Of course. Well, again, control. You know, what you call control. Because for me, control is not about controlling what someone is doing, but rather about performance management. It's using OKRs to set goals. It's conducting online one-on-ones. It could be implementing reporting, or if there's a system employees work with, you can look without needing reports. For example, for recruiters, if there's an ATS, you don't need reports from the recruiter, you just log in once a week. It's simply a ritual for you as a manager to check in weekly, look at recruiters' metrics and see who you can help improve. So that's how it works. Yes, I've had remote employees since PKLI. There was an employee in Germany, in Berlin, employees, and in other companies, people can just work from home. I guess since around 2017, this boundary between office and non-office has blurred. I started relying more on tools. And honestly, even then, I didn't care where the employee was located or where I was. There's a set of managerial practices that help. There are tools that help. And where we are physically, even now, I don't have that boundary anymore either. It's office work, it's not office work. There you have it. Thank you for the question. Well, I need to run. Get ready for the next class. Thank you all. Have a good evening and see you soon. Bye-bye.